Hey guys, welcome to BP the Bible Perspective. Part two of Bill Maher's all white panel, whitewashing racism. Yeah, they've said things like cop kills because they're stressed. And why is everything always about race? Or not everything is always about race. And the perpetrators of crime are black. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Um, Again, on last week's, well, probably by the time this is aired, it's going to be week before last, late week before. Bill Maher had a panel on, and as you can see, they're all white. There's something else about that, and I said this in part one. But in it, he began to discuss the violence that is ravaging our nation. But then quickly turned it to, well, why does it always have to be about race? And he made some snarky comments to that effect. Well, then as the discussion progressed, you have people like ex-Congressman Tim Ryan, who says that, well, we just have to understand it's not about black cops or white cops. Cops are stressed. In other words, cops kill because they are under stress. And then you have Barry Reese, who said basically the perpetrators of crime are black, and why not label it a hate crime? Now, I'm going to let you hear again these segments so you can hear them in their own words, because again, I'm going to dissect what they are saying. Now, as I said, Bill Maher has been coming out of his white conservative closet for some time. And so when he goes on these anti-black rants, in other words, he's fed up with the society and the media talking about racism, right? And I also note that when he goes on these rants, that these panels are always all white. He doesn't even have some of the good Negroes on, like Van Jones. I think his name is Dr. Warthorder, Michael Warthorder, I believe. Don't let me, I don't want to butcher his name. But there are a lot of these black conservatives that he would find acceptable to have on. He doesn't even have them on. And trust me, some of these black conservatives that he would have on certainly would agree with him and echo his sentiments. Now, what is also of note is that this panel, not only are they all white, but they're liberal. In other words, they're supposed to be on our side, right? Really, and when I say this, the idea of when you hear conservative media, most notably Fox News, go on their anti-black rant, and now Bill is kind of swaying to that side, they, of course, have an all-white panels, and usually they will stack the panels with people that won't challenge, and such is the case here. In other words, they have people on that won't be able to say, okay, well, what you're saying is just crazy. What stats are you using? Or here are different perspectives. This panel is supposed to be all liberal and know all of this. And I'm not saying that they have to, know the Negro national anthem and celebrate Kwanzaa, but they should know truth, which means to me that they're showing their true colors, plain and simple. So let's go back and we're going to dissect this, but before we dissect this, let me do a quick recap of part one. In other words, the reason why I am talking about this as far as part one. In part one, I said that in answer to some of the statements that they have made, you have to go back to the genesis of this nation, which has its genesis in slavery. Okay, and I said that this is a, of course, artist's rendition of slave auctions. And the reason why I show these pictures is because I said this is how the nation began. And then I also asked the question, how does a nation such as America, who is the only nation in history, because usually the latest argument, and disingenuous I might add, is to say that, well, America is like all the other nations who had slaves throughout history. In other words, hey, slavery has been a part of human history. And that is true, except America is the only nation that proclaims that all men are created equal by its creator, and they are endowed with inalienable rights by the creator, and then turn around and do this, right? And after slavery, you had this, Jim Crow. You had the reign of terror. Look at all the crowds of people. Look at this, young people. Look at that, young, okay? Now I'm saying in order for America to be the America that it is, this is the real America. And here's the point. They were conditioned to think that what you're seeing is okay. Obviously, I cropped these photos, hoping not to get flagged by YouTube. But the reason why I'm showing you this, notice how young the white girls are there. In other words, they are conditioned. Now, if you want to understand Karen, the phrase Karen today, look right there. See, look at this. They were conditioned to see black people a certain way. And you go all the way back to slavery, right? If you were walking in town and you walked past the slave auction, what would a person tell their children? That this is okay. Not only that it's okay, but that it's God's will. Okay? That God wants the races to be separate, and that God even condemned the black people to their dark skin and slavery. If I think, just ask the Mormons, who denied black people based upon the curse of Ham all the way to 1978, actually even further. Southern Baptists, Assemblies of God, all of these Christian denominations in the mid 90s. Okay, now why is that? We don't want to get into the religious side of it, but the point is that they were conditioned. Their minds were conditioned to say this was okay. And so the question becomes, when has this been changed? Now again, we're talking in general. We're not talking certainly all. But when has this been changed? So we look at today in 2023, and you go to, for example, Florida. And the governor there is banning this truth. He's banning teachings on slavery, banning the African American experience. They don't want this taught. So if they don't want this taught, and by the way, these young girls here would be grandmothers today. So what do you think they taught their children and their grandchildren? See? So when we come back to the Bill Mahers of the day and his panel, and then they ask, why does it always have to be about race? When did this change? And let me just say, with this panel here, when you have and I'm going to get into a thing, I'm not going to jump ahead. I'll let you hear their voice and then we'll unpack it. But when you hear this kind of language, they live in a white bubble. And when I say that they are, when I say about them, about their not only just white privilege, but the white bubble, that they see the world through a white bubble, through a white lens that they can't understand, which again I call BS on. But let me do this. I'm going to go back and I'm going to play the segment, and then I'm going to come back and then dissect it. But I want to play it in its in its fullness, and then I also want you to understand that there's going to be a part where I'm going to splice in a segment that was edited out, and I think it's important that you hear it. So I'm going to apologize for that segment because it is of extremely poor quality, but I think it's important to understand. So you'll know when I jump to it for sure. So here we go.
It was a really rough week for watching violent videos. I got up today, the first thing I saw was the Paul Pelosi video, which was, I mean, there's just so much rage in this country. There have been 39 mass shootings already. We're not out of January. And then this week, people learned the names of a couple of cities here in California, Half Moon Bay and Monterey Park was the other one, right? And you know, these shootings happen. We go through this ritual where then we wait for them to announce the race of the shooter, like we're waiting for the Oscar nominations, because that's, you know, somehow to a lot of people the most important thing. And I just thought it was very interesting that this week Asians were killed by Asians, two Asian men who were, you know, 66 and 72. And then this week we just got this video of the Memphis Five. A black man is brutally beaten in Memphis by 5 cops. They're all black. I guess what I'm asking is, America's culture of violence, it does go deeper than race, right? And I think this monofocus we have on race is short-circuiting us trying to fix some of the realer problems. Would you agree?
Well, definitely deeper concerns here, and this is an opportunity for us to have that conversation. The conversation about mental health, the conversation about guns, the conversation about
cops,
the cops, and the stress, and the stress that cops are under. I'm not defending these guys. Of course, this was a tragedy. They should be prosecuted, full extent of the law, the whole 9 yards. But if we don't, at some level, realize that it's not a white cop or a black cop, it's a cop who's under stress, who's underpaid. I have cops in my congressional district, Bill.
Is monofocus.
I basically think we should classify every weekend in Chicago as a hate crime. If that's what it's going to take to get people to pay attention to the violence in this country. I feel the same way. I feel like we hear about a horrible incident and we wait to see the race or identity of the perpetrator and the race and identity of the victim, and we know exactly how it will play based on that. But to the family of the person that's murdered, does it matter? I don't really think it does.
It's also misleading. It's misleading that everything is always racial. I mean, I feel like this is one of the big flaws of the left these days, is they have this monofocus. You know, again, when the education system breaks down, people don't know a hell of a lot. Is monofocus. You know, again, when the education system breaks down, people don't know a hell of a lot, so they focus on something that's very obvious, black and white. Everyone can understand racism, and of course it is still a real thing in this country. Mm-hmm. It's just not the only thing.
Right, and a black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime is white, and a black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime, as it often is in a city like Chicago, is black. And I think, you know, we haven't seen the video out of Memphis yet, but I'm sure it's going to be as horrible as the police chief there says it is. But I think, I hope that the takeaway from it is not the takeaway of the summer of 2020, which is that we need to defund the police so that worse people decide to go and become police officers. I mean, that is what we're living through right now.
And there's a big exodus from the police squads all
the
over the country.
LAPD is losing 50 police officers a week right now. You call the LAPD, they will not show up for 30 minutes.
And who pays, that's, again, with the woke, who pays for that when there's less police and less competent police? a lot of people of color in communities where they want more policing.
Yeah.
Right, and if you're in a community like mine, you can go and
Okay, so I want to now go back and dissect this. I've already dissected the first segment, so I'm going to skip to the poorly. The reason why that segment that I'm getting ready to splice, the one I spliced in that showed Barry Rice's comments, was because it was edited out. In other words, when I found the Bill Maher's clip, this was already that was edited out, so I had to, kind of makeshift, like I say, so it's poor, that's why I did that. It's poorly, and I admit that it is poor quality, but what she said in there, I think we need to unpack, because again, this is a white perspective coming from liberals, by the way. Now he don't like to say, he certainly wants to distance himself from what he's calling woke. Now, before I go back and unpack it too, let me just say, part of the problems of this perspective is a lot of converging here. Now with Bill Maher, he's purposely doing this. He's been doing this for 20 years. Like I say, over the last couple of years, he's been coming out of the white conservative closet. Now, with Tim Ryan, I don't know too much about him, but that asinine statement that cops are under stress, that's why they kill? That's the question. Let's not accuse them of it, but let's ask the question that because it's an asinine statement, that it's not about white cops or black cops. And by the way, the reason why this is very interesting, I refrain from addressing the Memphis cop situation, because I'm going to, of course, do a video on that. But the idea of it's getting so much attention because they're black cops, and the idea is that if you go back into the first segment that Bill started his rant, that we'll see it's black cops or it's Asian cops. Remember, he started off talking about the Paul Pelosi attack, and then the two cities where the mass shooters were mass shooters. Now, the fact that they said it was Asian is because they're capitalizing on the increase in Asian attacks. Well, when Bill says, well, why does it have to be about race? Well, tell me, what should it be about? Then how about this, Bill? Why didn't you address the whole situation? You started off talking about it. You turned it into race. It just happened to be anti-black race, but you turned it into that. So let's go back and dissect, of course, what I'm going to start with, again, the poorly quality spliced in segment with Barry Wise.
basically think we should classify every weekend in Chicago as a hate crime. If that's what it's going to take to get people to pay attention to the violence in this country. I feel the same way. I feel like
classic mistake is this: who says people are not paying attention to the violent crime in high crime areas? Who's not paying attention? Maybe you're not, because you live in a white bubble. But there's plenty of attention by black activists. One of the things that the right, like people like Fox News and all that they kind of disparaged, that they said that Barack Obama was just a community organizer. Remember when they said that? Well, that community organizer, those are the people that are constantly fighting to bring attention and resolution and to solve the problems of crime in inner cities. And then, of course, let's ask the question: you're a journalist, you know this, you have access to this information. Why isn't there attention being drawn there. And you don't have to label black people as doing hate crimes, because you don't care about that. White people don't care about black on black crime. So the question is, from those, why aren't they listening to the organizers, the activists who are constantly trying to get legislation, city hall, city government, state government, federal government, to render aid, to render help to these areas? Answer that question.
We hear about a horrible incident and we wait to see the race or identity of the perpetrator and the race and identity of the victim, and we know exactly how it will play based on that. But
Okay, tell us how is it going to play, because you know the answer to that. A white girl gets kidnapped, a white girl gets shot, a white girl gets damaged, and they're all over it. There are untold numbers of black on black crime murders that have never been unsolved. Are you talking about that?
to the family of the person that's murdered, does it matter? I don't really think it does. And
It's also misleading. It's misleading that everything is always racial. I mean,
Okay, let me address that nonsense. Okay, I read this before. I'm going to read it again when he says that it's misleading that it's always racial. Okay, Tamira Rice, Eric Gardner, John Crawford, Michael Brown, Philando Castile, Terrence Crutcher, Stephon Clark, Botham Jean, Ronald Green, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. Now, there's a slither of names of unarmed black men shot by white cops. Now, you tell me, why don't you report on these? Okay, have you reported on these? And tell me, how would you report these in a non-racial way? And of course, you would have to go back and talk about let's see, you'd have to kind of go back and talk about all of the policing issues, wouldn't you? That's targeting the African American. Let me say this. I'll let him finish off, and I'm going to go to the other clip.
like this is one of the big flaws of the left these days, is they have this monofocus. You know, again, when the education system is monofocus, you know, again, when the education system breaks down, people don't know a hell of a lot, so they focus on something that's very obvious, black and white. Everyone.
Well, again, they focus on black and white. Tell me, Bill, how would you focus on these names? How would you focus on it? It's always black and white. What exactly is your point? Let's continue.
Can understand racism, and of course it is still a real thing in this country. It's just not the only thing.
right, and
Okay, so it's not the only thing. Racism is not the only thing. Then, tell us, great white man, tell us what is the other issue here. See, you spent the time talking about that, but you did not tell us what the other thing is. So is it just you just bloviating, complaining? And so let's continue here. As I said, these names. Now let me just say this because this also came up. The New York stop and frisk. Okay, now watch this. The New York stop and frisk. Reign terror. By the way, both black and white people, but reign terror in New York City finally was not done away with, but constitutionally corrected, I should say, to a great degree. And basically what the New York stop and frisk was, it enabled cops to bypass probable cause, constitutional rights to move about freely. And basically said a cop can come up, stop, and search you, right, because they think based upon what they observed. And here is the thing. They said, well, we didn't say anything about race in this law, which made their case even worse because 90% of the time they targeted black and brown people. They stopped black and brown people. What's even worse is that 83% of the time they found no just cause for the stop. They didn't find no drugs, no crime, no weapons, no even violation of for a reason for the stop. For example, they didn't even find to say let's jaywalk. No, they didn't find any of that. Yeah, at the same time, you don't find them stop and frisking on Wall Street. Probably unless it's black, but why wouldn't you? You would have a dust cloud of drugs if they did that, but they don't. We don't even know the numbers because they just don't stop and frisk on Wall Street. But yet they stop and frisk innocent black people. So that's why it's always about race, because who is being targeted.
And a black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime is white, and a black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime, as it often is in a city like Chicago, is black. And I think.
Okay, the perpetrators of crime are often black. She knows better than that. But let's deal with that. First and foremost, you're dealing with a news media, or the news media and how they report crime. I just gave you an example. Stop and frisk, they stopped black and brown people, but they didn't stop anyone on Wall Street. Can you guess the color of those on Wall Street? Second thing is that when you talk about the crime rate in Chicago, they said the perpetrators of crimes are black people. Well, the perpetrators of white crimes in white areas, guess who they are? White people. The perpetrators of crime in Asian areas would be what? Asian people. The perpetrators of crime in Hispanics would be Hispanic people. In other words, people in the geographical location are going to be more likely victims of crime by their own race. Okay? Now, she's ignoring that by saying, well, it's the black on black crime. But further, the black on black crime in Chicago that she's so, really want to focus on, and which is kind of interesting to me, is that she, I believe, lives in New York or the New York area, which is, again, why I mention New York. You don't have to travel outside of the metropolitan area of New York. But she cites Chicago. Okay, why? Because that's where the news media focuses on. Because, one, think about this. The crime rate is centralized in high crime areas, drug and gang affected areas. In other words, the average black person is not stepping outside of their homes to a hail of bullets. But in drug and gang areas, they are. Let's go a step further. Why are they stepping out in those areas? Here's the reason why. They're allowed, plain and simple. In other words, if black people, as she called them, the perpetrators, black perpetrators, were to go to white areas, how long do you think that would last? Not long. Not long at all. Let's continue.
We haven't seen the video out of Memphis yet, but I'm sure it's going to be as horrible as the police chief there says it is. But I hope that the takeaway from it is not the takeaway of the summer of 2020, which is that we need to defund the police so that worse people decide to go and become police officers. I mean, that is.
Where in the heck did she get that? Now, so let's get this straight. The defund the police, which I think is a poor slogan. I understand it because when you think about police departments, white police departments that spend millions on military grade weaponry, who are you fighting? They're fighting American citizens, right? To combat American citizens. They want to be able to combat these people with tanks and, again, just these military grade weapons. Right. Okay. First and foremost, let me just say that their opposition is not that great. In other words, the gang people are not raging war against the police, unlike what uh, the ex-congressman said, that they're not going into these areas stressed out because I don't know if I'm going to live today. No, they go in there arrogant. They go in there knowing that, guess what? We could mess with people any way we want. Hence, stop New York stop and frisk. So the question is that when she says here that, the defunding the police, again, you're showing your true colors. The defunding the police, even though I don't think it's the best slogan, they're talking about why do you need to put millions of dollars into tanks, into these, military grade weapons, and you don't even, and by the way, you don't even need that in the high gang affiliate areas because the gang people are only killing gang members. They're not even killing white people that come in to buy drugs. They're not killing white people that come in for prostitution. Let's continue.
What we're living through right
and
now.
there's a big exodus from the police squads all
The
over the country.
LAPD is losing 50 police officers a
Right.
week right now. You call the LAPD, they will not show up for 30 minutes.
And who pays?
Again, this is one of the most terrible whitewashings I've seen. 50 cops are quitting. Why? Because they can't bust heads. Because they can't abuse their power. That's why they're quitting. You look at police departments, by the way, and she cites L.A. Interesting enough. How about New Hampshire? I just saw a report of New Hampshire, where the police chiefs, they are training their cops, okay, in de-escalation, saying that, hey, we will not have a Memphis-style incident. So the point is that if those 50 cops are quitting, I say let them quit, hire 50 more cops, and train them right. How about that? See, the problem here is unarmed people, unjustified shootings. We're not talking about the gangbangers that's actually causing the havoc in these neighborhoods. And secondly, you just covered up by saying that if a cops receive a call, they don't show up for 30 minutes. That's a violation of the law, their duty, and their oath. You just gave them cover for that. They need to be fired if they're not responding to calls. Because let me tell you something. When the police show up, no one, the people are not saying the cops are here, let's gang up on them. No. Let's continue.
That's again, with the woke, who pays for that when there's less police and less competent police? A lot of people of color in communities where they want more policing.
Yeah.
Right, and if you're in a community like mine,
All right, she goes on to blow away some. I'm not going to play that. But he says, who pays for that? Now, he said the woke, but he said, well, who pays for that? The people of color. They're already paying for that bill. Your guest host, Barry Reese, just said the cops are not showing up when they are called. So, wait a minute. What does defund the police have to do with the cops doing their job? Watch this, and doing their jobs right. So if they're not showing up, the black communities in those areas are already suffering. So here's the thing I would say, pull you all's heads out of your white bubbles. See? Which you won't. But okay, guys, look, that is my perspective. I wanted to present this and dissect the nonsense here. Because these are all news people who have access to information. And to me, they're showing their true colors by the kind of information they are disseminating. Okay, look, that is my perspective. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. See you next time.